Welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Brad Thomas here with Vaughn and Eric Froton, and this is the college football takeover presented by BetMGM. Fellas, the talk of the town, not the presidency, but the college football playoff rankings. The first rankings came out, and I'm just going to do a quick rundown for anyone who doesn't know who they are. Number 1, Oregon. Number 2, Ohio State. Number 3, Georgia. 4, Miami. 5, Texas. 6, Penn State. 7, Tennessee. 8, Indiana. 9, BYU. 10, Notre Dame. 11, Alabama. And 12, Boise State. Eric, any first takeaways from these college football rankings?
Yeah, I just want to extend my deepest sympathies to the SMU faithful. 8-1, convincing victory, obviously, they're coming off of here against Pittsburgh and what they thought might be where SMU, they turn into the pumpkin under Cinderella, folklore, but that did not happen. They're on the outside looking in at 13th, but at the same time, it's really tough to see who do you squeeze out, because it'd have to be one of the big boys. It'd have to be an Alabama. It'd have to be a Notre Dame type, and I know that's not what you want to hear, Brad, being an Alabama fan here, that they're on the outskirts, but I might actually prefer SMU to them with their 2 losses. How do you feel about that, pal?
I don't mind it, right? Like, if Alabama does in the season run the table, they'll get in, right? But you have to talk about the strength of the SEC versus the strength of the ACC. SMU is really deserving of a playoff spot from what they've put on the field, but this has just been kind of like the MO of the committee, the precedent that's been set. Even if you look back to last year when Florida State went undefeated, sure, Jordan Travis went down and they weren't the same team, but still an undefeated ACC team not making the 14 playoff. Now we're in the 12 team where we possibly could have an SMU team who could have 2 losses on their schedule come after the ACC championship that doesn't get in. Or what happens if SMU get into the championship game, they play, and then they beat an undefeated Miami? Now you have to kick somebody else out. It's interesting times. Vaughn, any initial takeaways that you had?
Yeah. I mean, certainly the conference realignments. I think you see that the Big Ten, the SEC, getting 8 out of 12 college football bids so far. Indiana's one team that their season might be make or break when they play Ohio State. But if they sneak in, they're a team that could get bumped down. We could see another SEC team come in, like an LSU, a Texas A&M. Depending on what happens with these teams, because they all have games that set them at 2 or 3 losses on the season. And as we know, looks like 3 losses will probably get you out unless you may be an Alabama type team. But there's questions all around this. I mean, Notre Dame here getting in this, obviously their season's been impressive, and recently they've been the most impressive. But if they lose another game, they have Florida State, Virginia, Army, USC. If they lose one of those games, their bad loss, Northern Illinois team, that's 4-4. Do they get bumped with 2 losses because of their cake strength of schedule? So there's a lot of questions I think that we could be looking at moving forward with a lot of these teams. Even, in the Big 12, Brad, with a team like Colorado, who could win out and maybe make the Big 12 conference championship. So I don't even know where to begin, because there's so many things that could happen in the next month.
Yeah, it does definitely look like they're playing favorites in terms of winning with the strong schedule. If you win with a weak schedule, you're kind of at risk of being eliminated, especially if you have 1 loss. BYU, Indiana, SMU, all teams who don't have the strongest schedules. I mean, SMU has a couple of ranked wins, but if they get to those 1-2 losses, they might be out. Let's get into the games. All right. We're going to talk about the first big game, which possibly could be a college football playoff elimination game. Number 11, Alabama, traveling to Baton Rouge to take on number 14, LSU. The Crimson Tide are a 3-point favorite, in the total set at 58.5. As always, when Alabama goes to Death Valley, it's a night game, 7:30 p.m. kickoff. And of course, I'm going to take the floor on this one first, because I didn't write this down, but I went on Monument Sports by the book, and I gave out LSU plus the points. I could see a lot happening in this game where if you want Alabama, you could take them, right? But there's a couple things that we have to talk about first. Address the numbers. Alabama 1-3 against the spread away from home this season. The one game they covered, they played against a backup quarterback for 3/4 of that game. Sure, they blew out Wisconsin, but it wasn't a pretty performance. I think that getting 3 points in an environment this tough is just something you have to take, right? When you watch Alabama and Neyland, they struggled with the volume. At one point, Kalen DeBoer early in the first quarter said, I think we have to go to a silent count. Like, those are the kinds of things that are going to happen in Death Valley. Why I didn't end up making this an official pick is the hurricane coming, Hurricane Raphael. I actually think if these wind gusts get more than those 13, get up to those 15s and 20s, it favors the Crimson Tide a little bit more because LSU hasn't had success running the ball. And I just don't think they're just going to turn it on. But when you have a guy as skilled as Garrett Nussmeier, you have to take the points when you can because he's the kind of quarterback that at any moment in the game, he can bring you back into it. I have Alabama like a 1 or 2 point favorite in this game. So it wasn't quite enough for me to snag the +3.5, the +3, whatever it's at now. But I kind of just think that this is one of those games that's going to be a lot trickier than a lot of people think. Won't be an Alabama easy cover there. Eric, tell me what you like about Mr. Garrett Nussmeier.
Yeah, well, Garrett Nussmeier, I don't like that he's thrown some interceptions at some inopportune times, specifically against Texas A&M. Of course, we all saw that in living color. But he has gone over this 289.5 yardage mark in all but one game this season. And, you know, when you're talking about those sort of numbers, you have the Brian Kelly offense here, of course. And the one game was an Arkansas team at Arkansas where they were beating them 34-10. And they were basically didn't have to worry about them at all on the offensive side. So they could afford to give it to Caden Durham a little bit where he eclipsed 100 yards for the first time and only time this season. So I just think with the exception of that particular game, this is how they score. LSU has to throw. And Brad, you alluded to it. And then on the other side, too, keep in mind with Alabama, in some of these more competitive games, they've allowed some passing yards. Georgia, all right? They gave up 439. Vandy put up 252 against them. South Carolina, 242. None of those teams are passing-oriented teams. In fact, if you look at any of the teams they have played, I mean, it's just Georgia. Mizzou, Tennessee, Wisconsin, none of those teams are throwing the ball at all. This is the first team that is really, besides Beck, that has a, plus 51%, if you'd say, pass ratio. So I just think with all those factors involved, Alabama likely to be ahead of in this game. I think it all lines up for LSU to have to throw the ball often. I have one more lean on this, as we kind of alluded to, and that is on your side, Brad, with Alabama. Jam Miller, running back for Alabama. We've seen that 2 running back system, with Jam sharing with Justice Haynes. And his shares and his stock has continued to kind of go down over the past 5 games. All right. So he's at 55.5 yards that he's been listed at least when he's opened. Is when we're going. Last game, against Mizzou, that's the prime time. It's 34-0. Mizzou had Drew Pine, and there's nothing they could do. 48 yards. Tennessee, 42. South Carolina, 42. Vandy, 45. And Georgia, 8 yards. He's at 55.5 through his last 5 games with Justice Haynes cutting into his tallies. I cannot take an over there. I'm going under 55.5 on Jam Miller.
I like a lot of those points there for your props. I like the Nussmeier stuff specifically because going into the year and looking at the schedule, we feel like Alabama would have been tested through the air. And a lot of those teams that you just mentioned, Georgia, obviously Tennessee, Missouri, but as the season goes on, we find more and more about teams and teams find a way to scheme up against them. And I think us seeing the line move indicates that this is the do or die game for Alabama. We know for LSU it really is, but if Alabama loses this game, they have Mercer, Oklahoma, and Auburn up next. Brad, as you know, they should win all 3 of those games. The Auburn game is always a good game for the most part, but Alabama just really controls their own destiny here, where LSU has been a team, on the fringe all season. So I lean Alabama to win this game, but I think that LSU looked so impressive last week, Eric, in the first half. And that second half, they just completely fell apart against Texas A&M. And it's 10 days ago, whatever it was, almost 2 weeks ago, it seems like. And I think that the under is probably the bet I'm going with here. Again, guys, I mean, Alabama has been faithful to me in this department over the last 4 weeks, cashing 3 times. But I just don't see either team lighting it up, putting up 30-plus points here. I mean, LSU hasn't reached 30 in their big 3 games against SEC opponents, and USC included too. And for Alabama, I mean, they've allowed 25 or fewer points the last 3 games. So I just see another under game in general. But Alabama flipping to the favorite, Brad, I think that points to the Crimson Tide winning this game.
Yeah, listen, I'm going to say one last thing about Alabama. That this is a really good football team that got punched in the mouth by a Vanderbilt side, and as we've seen the game kind of the season go on, this Vanderbilt team is not the Vanderbilt of old. Road game in Neyland, and since that Vanderbilt game, defensively, they've improved. Like this was a team that was in, I believe, like the 50s in 3rd and 4th down success. Now they are, what are they now? 30s. So it's coming down a little bit. We'll see what happens when they play against the LSU team who, they're one of the best teams on 3rd and 4th down because of Mr. Garrett Nussmeier. Let's move over to another game, definitely an elimination game for Ole Miss. That's number 2, Georgia, traveling to Ole Miss. Number 16, Georgia, 2.5-point favorite. Total set at 55.5. 3:30 kickoff. Vaughn, take this one away.
So we are including the last game, we talked about ranked versus ranked matchup season, obviously. So, a trend is always the favorites do pretty well in these matchups, 56% since 2020. So, you're not profiting a large margin here, but lean towards the favorite of Georgia in this elimination game for Ole Miss. But it's a situation, Brad, where I'm scared to take them, though. I haven't seen much from the offense that makes me feel very brave about the Georgia Bulldogs. Carson Beck over the last month, we've talked about him consistently on here, but last week, Etienne completely fell out of the rotation. They played so many different running backs last week. It's to the point now where I don't feel like Georgia's team total overs are great bets anymore. And I'm kind of leaning towards the under here. They're placing at 28.5, 29.5. They've scored 30 in all but one game this year. So I kind of feel like that's a fishy number on the road. But if I'm playing that, I might as well be playing the total under 54.5 or 55.5, whatever you can get. I think that's probably the safer bet because Georgia should win this game. But honestly, I'm kind of scared to place a bet on this one. I'd be more confident taking Alabama than I would be taking Georgia or Ole Miss here, Eric.
Yeah, I don't blame you. This is obviously one of the games of the week, so we're talking about it. But with Ole Miss, Henry Parrish, their starting running back, not on the depth chart. He got injured last week, so we'll probably see Ulysses S. Bentley. On the other side, Travis Etienne for Georgia is, quote-unquote, toughing it out in practice, according to Kirby Smart. But on Monday, he said he feels good. So, parse those words. It looks like he's trending towards playing. With Ole Miss, they've actually played the 71st ranked schedule in the country, while Georgia's played the 15th. So, just take a look at the discrepancy in talent. You want to talk about, as we discussed, strength of schedule. There it is for you. But Ole Miss, 18 sacks over the last 2 games. They are bringing it on the defensive line. If I had to make a play on this game, I am leaning towards Carson Beck's over 270.5 receiving yards. Reason being is he has thrown the ball. He's thrown it 40 times a game in any game that's even remotely contested. And you look at that, for the last 5 games, he's thrown at least 40 passes. That's what happens when Georgia gets into the SEC play. And with already having their number 1 running back banged up against a tough Ole Miss front, I think that the advantage for Georgia is throwing the ball. And that's kind of backed up by what you see with other teams have done. Look at Arkansas last week. They put up 365 with 2 different quarterbacks. Taylor Green gets hurt. Malachi Singleton, I've never seen him throw the ball particularly well before. Did against Ole Miss last game. LSU put up 337. We talked about Nussmeier. And Wake threw for 265. So in terms of these situations, when it comes up against these more prolific passing offenses, they're able to move the ball against Ole Miss through the air. And I think that's kind of what we see on Georgia as well. Throwing the ball 40 times for the past 5 games. I got to think script-wise, over 270.5 is where it's heading.
There's always been this Ole Miss way under Lane Kiffin where they look like the best team in the world when they're playing against lesser talent. Then when it comes to the big games, they often struggle. I really wanted to be pro Georgia here. It's just the Kirby Smart thing to do is win the big games, home or away. He's just such a good coach. Against Florida, they struggled, but a lot of that was Carson Beck, right? He threw 3 interceptions in that game, and then Travis Etienne goes down with a rib injury, and the running game is not the same. I couldn't get there, though, just because of the fact that there's 2 things that Eric said that I want to kind of extend on is how well Ole Miss are getting to the quarterback and how poor Mr. Carson Beck has done under pressure. In the last 2 games, 5 for 20, 17 yards, 2 interceptions under pressure. And I saw somewhere on X where they said, Carson Beck has been struggling with disguised coverages. I actually want to extend on that. It's more than just the coverages. He's it looks like when they are disguising who they're sending is confusing him more. Then he doesn't know who's dropping back into coverage, who's coming, and that's where he kind of has that issue. Whenever you have linebackers picking you off, that's generally what happens because you don't see them dropping back into coverage. Ole Miss, phenomenal so far this season, especially offensively. First in the SEC in total yards per game, scoring 42 points per game, first in yards per play. No Parrish. Trey Harris is banged up as well. So they have their question marks too. And Lane Kiffin has yet to win a big game. So it was good enough for me to pass. There's a lot of question marks, but there's a lot to kind of unpack in this game. And I think it's just one where 3:30 p.m. Eastern comes around, you grab your popcorn, you grab your adult water, and you enjoy it and have some fun. This is going to be one of the most pivotal games in the SEC this season, because if Georgia wins, that's another ranked win for them to kind of go up on their standings in the record in the rankings. And if Ole Miss wins, they're right back into conversation. I'm actually the kind of guy who's rooting for absolute chaos. We want Ole Miss to win. We want to see Indiana beat Ohio State in a couple of weeks. Like, I just want it all to be crazy and be a fun schedule. That said,
you definitely want to have fun, Brad. I'm just sorry that in Florida, you didn't get the requisite 60% to have a more herbal sort of a afternoon. I apologize. I know that didn't go through for you, buddy.
Well, didn't go through. Maybe next time. Let's go to Florida at number 5, Texas. The Longhorns are a 21.5-point favorite. Total set at 45.5. Another night game. This one, a lot of question marks. DJ Lagway, I heard he's going to play, but if we've seen anything in recent times, normally when players are dealing with a hamstring and they rush back, it's never good. Initially, I wanted to go with the Florida team total under. Oh, wait, no, I actually did lock it in. I locked it in.
Lock that in, babe.
Yeah, I locked it in. Florida team total under 13.5. I was waiting for it to go up to 14, and it kind of just hit a wall once that Lagway news hit. I just think this is a massive number for the Gators to hit. If we have Aiden Warner under center, they're going to be a run-first team. They were forced to throw 26 times with Warner. They only completed 7 passes. They got to the end zone once, basically on a let-off on defense. This is a Texas team who knows. They absolutely know, after looking poor the last couple of weeks, that they have to bring it. And I feel like Texas is one of those teams where they are kind of, I don't know, disrespected at this point. The hype was so high on the Longhorns, and then they lost at home to the Bulldogs, and now everyone's writing them off. Quinn Ewers hasn't been great, but I mean, this is the team that's third in EPA margin so far this season. Great against the drop back, which is important to this game, because I literally think they can just stack the box and say, what's his name? Jacoby Johnson. Are you going to beat us on the ground? I don't think so. So I like the Florida team total under 13.5. It's minus 105 because people are still betting the over, but the books are being pretty protective. They don't want to get to 14 because that's just going to be a home run bet for anyone. Eric, why do you like the Florida team total under?
Good luck getting a 14 points with Aiden Warner and a quarterback. 9 for 26 with an interception last game. I mean, we're on their third QB. They never thought they'd have to resort to this, but ACL for Graham Mertz. DJ Lagway got hurt last week. He's out. You got a pretty good hamstring injury, him and Dak both at the same time. So you're starting a third string QB against the number 1 ranked pass defense in the country of Texas. I don't have any expectations of Florida being even remotely able to move the ball effectively against Texas. I think you have to bet under those 2 touchdowns. That's a great bet, in my opinion.
I think the only reason why the over is moving, Brad, is because people are thinking Texas is going to put up points here.
Yeah.
I mean, Florida's probably feeling pretty deflated. Like they looked good against Tennessee, right? They lose in overtime. They were up at halftime in that game. They come out, they smack Kentucky the next week. They get a bye week with Georgia on deck. They're beating Georgia at halftime. Then everything goes sideways in the second half. Now you go to Texas. Not a good situation with a third string quarterback. So people probably do think Texas is going to obliterate this team, and why not? When you look at the historical data too, I mean, Florida has not been double-digit underdogs in consecutive games since last year, and before that was 1992. So we know this Florida program is going down right now. And they've lost all 3 of the last 3 times they've been in position like this. They've lost by at least 21 points. So 21.5 is the spread. No reason why I think Texas can't cover that, as well as cash your guys' team total under too.
It's going to be interesting. Right now, the Longhorns have the 4th highest national title odds. Probably going to pass on that. But everyone's favorite segments coming up. And last week, I didn't have a single ladder play. I'm actually going to slip in 2 this week because there's 2
Let's
that I really
go.
like. But before we get there, I want to let you know just 4 drivers remain, and they head to the desert to determine who will be crowned champion. It's the NASCAR Championship in Phoenix with coverage starting at Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern on NBC and Peacock. Ladder plays.
Let the fun begin.
This is like I get a little charged up when you guys get to the ladder plays, whether I have my own or I'm tailing you guys. Eric, kick us off with the first ladder play.
Well, the TCU run defense has been one of the most giving in the Power 4 this year. Last week, Bryson Washington went and popped them for 2 bills. Freshman running back for Baylor. They ran for 257 against them last week in a 37-34 game. Week before, gave up 180 to Texas Tech, gave up 207 to Houston, 238 to SMU, and a whopping 289 to UCF. TCU has one of the absolute apex worst run Ds in the country, regardless of conference strength. And that is a good thing for this limping Oklahoma State team. I mean, we know we've been dealing with the Alan Bowman show, British comedy legend, fallen low, and obviously Ollie Gordon. I mean, he just has not been able to get going. Put up 107 against a good BYU D, but was not able to get going against Arizona State last week. He wants to get going, though. They're going to try to give him as many carries as he can handle because they're not throwing the ball particularly well. And let's face it, they want to kind of try to control this game because TCU is going to be gassing it up. 110 yards is plus 350 for Mr. Ollie Gordon. We know who he is. We know the talent. The offensive line hasn't been great, but gosh, against this TCU run D, everybody's lighting him up. I think you can do a lot worse than 3.5 to 1.
Like that. I'll go ahead, Vaughn. You go with yours.
I mean, you want me to follow up Ollie Gordon? This guy burned me so bad earlier this season. I still have nightmares of that.
TCU.
Yeah, I know, bro. I know, but it was literally on my girlfriend's birthday, and I'm like, Ollie Gordon's got to bring us all this cash. We got free bet now. Ollie Gordon, he's banned. He's banned for me. Good luck though. You know who's not banned, Brad? The guy Shadur Sanders. He was our guy all season long, and I think he could still be our guy here. Him and Travis Hunter. Eric, this is the point of the season where Travis Hunter has to start scoring more and more touchdowns so we get that Heisman in our pockets, baby.
I've got the ticket from January 5th last year, and I'm ready to cash it, baby.
Let's go. And I think that he could be a touchdown guy here. We could go 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, first touchdown score. Get creative with Travis Hunter this week. You're getting 3-to-1 odds on him to score 2 touchdowns. And Shadur Sanders, he hasn't thrown for 4 passing touchdowns since Colorado State and North Dakota State, 2 games that we actually called him to do that on this show. We're going to do it a 3rd time. Texas Tech, their defense has been atrocious the last 3 weeks.
Yes,
and they're coming off a big win against Iowa State, who's undefeated. Great time for Colorado to now give them a loss of their own and get back in this Big 12 conversation. So I like Colorado. I like Shadur Sanders. I like Travis Hunter on Saturday, boys.
Man, I hope they don't give away too much of that spice because I'll be at the game. What is that, next week? Watching them, their homecoming. So hope they come in flying. I'm going to go to my first ladder play. And this one I was back and forth on. I ended up having to pull the trigger. It's Mr. Aaron Anderson. I took him. I laddered his receiving yards. The numbers were just too big. For 80-plus receiving yards, plus 285. For 100-plus, it's plus 600. Weather's going to be an issue, obviously, hence the prices. And I didn't play his base. But just like looking at his game logs first and foremost, he has these big monster catches. Against Alabama, their secondary is solid. Like, if you talk about a whole young secondary from down to down instance, they're solid, but their biggest problem is 3rd down, letting up the big plays. This is an LSU team that has a 37% success rate on passing downs. A lot of that due to Mr. Will Campbell. He's protecting the quarterback. This is the fewest sack. He's the fewest sack quarterback in the entire college football world at 0.6 per game, which means he gets time. And I think these young corners are going to give up a couple of the big ones. So it's a little bit of a shot. The next one, I'm going to talk about this game in depth a little bit more, but it's Mr. Xavier Restrepo. I got to remember what his numbers were. I think it was 110 is what I took. Yeah, 110 plus 205 receiving yards. man, if he is not the safety valve for this team, I don't know who is. He's gone over the 100 mark 5 times this season. Last game, 146 yards. I actually like him to go over this because they're playing in Atlanta against Georgia Tech. The weather is actually really nice. The hurricane's not going to impact it that much, only like 5 miles per hour wind. And Georgia Tech is an offense that can absolutely keep up with Miami and maybe cause some trouble in that game. Defensively for Georgia Tech, that's a team you're not going to want to try to run on. A bunch of big beasts in the middle who plug up those running lanes. And already, Miami's one of the highest passing teams in the country. So for Mr. Restrepo to get 110 yards, it's plus 205. I had to take it.
Yeah, don't hate that. That script works out pretty well for them. I mean, Miami's been so fun to watch this year. And before we get into the Big Ten talk, Eric, is there any worry about Cam Ward winning the Heisman over Travis Hunter? He is now the favorite.
Sure, there's worry. Yeah, that could absolutely happen.
That's your biggest competition, right? You think rest of the season?
Yeah, probably. I think the Genty buzz has kind of died down over the past 2 games. He's been fine and everything, but you have to be otherworldly in order to get the Heisman from, the group of 5. And then naturally having an undefeated contender currently in the 4th spot. I mean, winning games, that always helps. Obviously, Jaden Daniels bucked that trend last year, but that's kind of a rarity. It's pretty much him and Lamar. Otherwise, you want somebody in a competitive team.
And Dillon Gabriel, his only success, Brad, relies on winning the Big Ten championship, correct?
Yeah, for sure. But I will say this with Dillon Gabriel, his numbers are pretty outstanding. Does have a couple of the interceptions, and he's doing this where they take their foot off the gas late in games, and he's in a quarterback-friendly system. I think it's going to end up going to Dillon Gabriel. I would really like it to go to Genty, even though he only had like 140 yards and a touchdown in his last game.
Such a shame.
What he's doing
Terrible
is
performance. Terrible.
Phenomenal. They're stacking the box, telling Madsen to beat you through the air, which, by the way, this is going to be a little trade secret. I'm letting everyone know. When Madsen lines come out now, guys, you just have to take his over because they're going to be around 200, and teams are literally stacking the box, selling out, and they're throwing the ball with a lot of success. That said, let's get into the Big Ten games. We'll start with the first one, Purdue at number 3, Ohio State. Ohio State a 38.5 point favorite, total set at 53.5. Game kicks off at 12 o'clock. And I'll say this, the Buckeyes actually perform pretty well at 12. They like those 12 weird early starts. I'm going with two plays in this one. And it's really a fade of Purdue in both aspects. First and foremost, I'm taking Emeka Egbuka over 69.5 receiving yards. Gone under in both of these games. Hasn't seen the target volume that he wanted. But let's remember the 2 teams that he played. Nebraska, number 1, is a very difficult defense to pass on because their pass rush gets to the quarterback. And that was the first game without Simmons for Ohio State. So they were having some issues at the left tackle position protecting Will Howard. Then the second game they play against Penn State, top 5 pass defense in the entire country. And then they end up getting into a script where they didn't need to pass the ball as much either. Now they're playing against a game which should be a little more fun. And I know from what I've heard from people who are close to this program is they want to get something going, right? They want their offense to be humming because they want to get in tune for if they make an eventual Big Ten run. I think there could be a little bit of fatigue set in, but then we got to remember this is a Purdue team who's pretty poor. I also took Ohio State first half team total over 27.5. Purdue giving up over 20.5 points per first half. If the air game's not working against this bad secondary of Purdue, the ground game will be working. They're giving up over 258 rush yards per game. I was going to take both running backs over in this game, but I just think that this can be one of those games that's settled early, and neither of these running backs are running the ball. So that's what I like. Eric, what do you like for this game?
Yeah, well, I mean, as part of Purdue's persona here, their quarterback situation has been up in the air. Hudson Card was brutal. Graham Harrell, the offensive coordinator, gets fired. They bring in Ryan Brown for a little test run. He does great his first game, just absolutely falls apart against Oregon. In comes Hudson Card. Who knows what's going on? They're probably better off just turning the page and going to Ryan Brown here. But what I'm concerned about is just their ability to move the ball at all against this elite Ohio State defense. And just, we've seen Purdue have real struggles offensively, period, but they're even worse against the good teams. Like they lost 35-0 to Oregon, 66-52 against Wisconsin, Nebraska 28-10. they just can't seem to mount any sort of a consistent threat. And that's a problem because Max Clare is their number one option. They don't have anything on the outside, so they pound him. But unless they're playing against Northwestern, we had 78 yards. They're playing against that 50-49 game against Illinois. He's going under this 42.5 receiving yardage mark against anybody who's a Power 4 program. And that goes for obviously Oregon, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Notre Dame. Yeah, he gets targets, but he's not going anywhere. And by the time the second half rolls around, they just want to get out of there and not be further embarrassed. I'm going to take the under on 42.5 yards for Max Clare. Tight ends, it's tough to get that far downfield.
Yeah, it's been kind of a theme for Purdue to be embarrassed in the second half of a few of their games this season. I feel like this could be one of them. I mean, I like your angle, Brad. The first half team total over. At this point in the season, we've talked about it a few times, mainly with Ohio State and Oregon, that they're going to be first half teams. They're going to chill out a little bit in the second half, play good defense, run the football, run the clock, and get on to the next week and get healthy because we're playing more games this season. You're going deeper into your rotations later into the year, and injuries can really hinder you. So these teams are trying to get in and get out healthy. So, yeah, I think Ohio State is another bet probably for the rest of the season, first halves only. And, I mean, they perform very well historically, too, as 2 touchdown or higher favor against Purdue, 7-3 against the spread, 10-0. But if you want to be creative, gentlemen, maybe you guys want to throw out your best pick in this game. I think that there's going to be plenty of points on Ohio State's side, so why not take a guy to score 2 touchdowns or 3 touchdowns, right? And I think when you look at this market, I mean, you talked about Mbuka, Brad. He's plus 210 for 2 scores. Jeremiah Smith's the favorite at plus 130. Judkins 240. Henderson plus 370. You even got Howard and Tate at 650 and 71. So 7-1. So I feel like there's a lot of fun that could be had in this Ohio State game. Am I wrong or am I right?
You're right. I actually haven't looked at the touchdown market in quite some time. I would actually take if you don't want to go chalk with Jeremiah Smith, I would take Will Howard to score twice. They're gonna have a ton of red zone trips, and he's been running a lot in the red zone. Another name that you should consider to get their first touchdown of the season, G. Scott Jr. At 3-1 to score a touchdown. He's kind of like at the beginning of the season wasn't getting that involved. Now he's getting more involved, running more routes. Had a big catch against Penn State. Looks like Will Howard starting to trust him a little bit more. I think his price is good. It's actually funny because I was monitoring their odds for the touchdowns. His odds are only like $1 less in a game where they're probably going to score 40 points.
I like that. I would not have considered G. Scott, to be honest with you. So I'm going to throw him in here. Eric, who's your pick so I can make a parlay right now?
Wait. G. Scott's not a parlay guy, by the way.
Not a parlay guy.
Wait, I mean, he's going to be in my parlay, though, so he is a parlay guy to me. What are you talking about? I literally just said I'm crafting one. You're going to tell me not to do
I'm just saying he's a great singles. Let me give you a one that I want this to hit, right? Go ahead and take Mr. Will Howard to score a touchdown.
I got him for 2 touchdowns already, and G. Scott anytime.
Okay, good.
Eric, do we need another one on the ground?
There's just nothing but touchdowns coming. There's just nothing but points coming in this game, apparently. Yeah, I mean, I guess my only issue is just how many overs can you take realistically? Like how many? There's only so many yards that can be accrued in this game, in theory, before they go and back off. Like, there's going to be plenty of overs. Who's it going to be? That's really the only question for me. Is it going to be Book? Is it going to be Smith? Carnell Tate's at 41.5. I like me some Carnell Tate. I think he probably, has some fun, but I don't know. It's there. You could take any of them. I understand whatever your personal preferences are. It's going to be just a bonanza of points here.
I'm having a hard time not booing you right now, but
sorry, buddy. There's just so many. It could be a Book. It could be Smith. Could be all of them.
Yeah,
it's hard with a 38.5 point spread with these 2 games to be like, oh yeah, this is because after the second half, then they're on ice. These guys are on ice.
All right. Well,
no matter how much damage they do.
I'm talking to Brad and Brad only now. So just for the next 30 seconds, Brad, how's this sound? Will Howard 2 touchdowns, G. Scott anytime, and Jeremiah Smith anytime. 41-1 odds.
I love it.
41-1.
We get G. Scott in the 4th quarter, and Will Howard gets his 2nd rushing touchdown in the 2nd or 3rd quarter. He throws one to Jeremiah Smith. Hey.
I'm probably going to take Will Howard to score 2 touchdowns by itself.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, have fun. It's late in the season. All right, what's the next game, Brad?
All right, let's get into the next game. Michigan. Wow. This game, before we get into it, I want to say the line has flipped. Michigan at number 8, Indiana. The Hoosiers are a 14.5-point favorite. Before the season started, Michigan was a 13.5-point favorite. Total set at 49.5.
Wow.
Wow. My God.
That's got to be the biggest flip.
That's
in
a
any game
great
this year.
anecdote, Brad. My God.
That's got to be the biggest
I didn't even
flip.
realize that until I was handicapping this game.
Woo.
I'm on Indiana. I'm going to be pro Indiana. Probably they are this year's Washington that was led by Mr. Gardner Minshew. If you guys remember, I think they finished the season somewhere like 11-1 against the spread. They went on a 9-game covering streak. The game they didn't cover was in the snow against Washington, I believe who it was against. This is Indiana, same thing. You know, they are fun offense. The spreads are generally too low. I got the number at 14. You know, this is a team that it's rolling 40 plus 7 games scoring 40 plus. They scored 30 in every single game. That alone, do we think Michigan's going to score 20 points? I can't find a way that Michigan scored 20 points. Yeah. This defense is a lot better than people are kind of saying, you know, 17th in success rate, net points per drive. I believe they're top 10. They're top 15 in net points per drive on defense. This is a fun team. Curtis Work looked good coming back too, through four touchdowns in that game. We talked about Justice Ellison last week. Michigan, man, holy smokes. When I just look at this team and I look at the numbers that are plaguing them, 102nd in college football in net points per drive, 94th in net field position. And they're all going to be correlated. So let me get there. 113th in early down success. What's happening with this team is their teams are able to stack the box. They're daring the quarterback to throw the ball. It's ineffective. And then they're having to punt, giving the opposition short fields. Well, Indiana's been taking advantage of that. They did so against Michigan State last week. I've never seen a live bet that was so free than free when I bet Indiana last week after the third punt. I think it was the third punt by Michigan State. I took them 25.5 and they obliterated, won by like 30, and they took the foot off the gas. It's not the same Michigan team. It's just poor guys. Eric, give me a prop for this game because I'm already on Indiana, but I want to make some more money.
Yeah, we all want to make more money. And this is obviously an intriguing game. Indiana ranked number 8. And their defense, as you mentioned, it has been absolutely incredible, especially against the run. You realize Michigan State ran for negative 36 yards last game against Indiana. They could do nothing on that line. They were getting humped all game long. And the most yards they've allowed on the ground all season is 137. And the only reason why that happened, that was UNC Charlotte, because they could not throw the ball forward. They were basically a rugby team. I mean, other than that, you'd be hard-pressed to find a 100-yard game. Shut down Nebraska, Northwestern. Obviously, we mentioned Michigan State. So, point is, teams just have to throw against Indiana. They don't have a choice. They've given up at least 200 yards in each of their last 5 games passing. And frankly, one particular position has been doing the damage. And I will get to that. Michigan has 63 receptions in 9 games to their tight end, 7 per game that season. That is the second highest mark amongst all Power 4 teams.
Makes sense.
Indiana's defense is allowing 4 receptions per game to tight ends this season, which is 27th worst among FBS defenses. The one thing that you can do really consistently against Indiana is you can hit those tight end leaks or, the Y option routes and be able to at least use them against their linebackers because they're protecting against the deep throw. You're not going to beat them deep, but you can get them on those little safety valves. And that's what teams have been doing. With Michigan, that's literally all they can do is throw the tight end. And with Davis Warren, I watched all his throws last week because I bet his under and he beat me. But I have to say, while he only completed 54% of his passes, he was clearly more competent than either of the other 2 quarterbacks that they've trotted out there. I don't think we're going to see much Alex Orji here. And if they're down Indiana, you're not going to be bringing in an option quarterback. I think you see Davis Warren, throwing. They're going to have to do that. They're not going to run the ball particularly well. And I think that plays right into the Colson Loveland over 5.5 receptions line.
I like that breakdown a lot. It makes sense. I mean, Davis Warren 100% looks like the best quarterback for this team. It makes you wonder why they went away from him early in the season, what they saw in the other quarterbacks to make them feel like he wasn't the best option for them. But I mean, that's all long and gone. The season has flipped. I mean, 27-point flip here on the spread. But speaking of spread, got to give a shout out as always to Signetti, the biggest coin respecter in college football, apparently.
Dude.
8-game money line and against the spread streak. But hold on. Last 19 games coached. This guy's 18-1 on the money line, 16-3 against the spread. All right. That's all this guy does is make money for other people, apparently. So I could not tell you do not take Indiana because they are clearly one of the best teams to be backing at this point. But they have a bye week up next too before Ohio State. So this could be a situation where it's first half, all gas, and they let off. I did lean the first half under, but it's basically because I don't have belief in Michigan to score many points here. And Indiana started slow, 0 points last week against Michigan State, guys. But yeah, this is all Hoosiers here. I mean, they haven't been favored to beat Michigan since when? 1968, 43 meetings ago. This is insane. So yeah, go Hoosiers.
Wow.
Keep rocking and rolling, baby.
Great.
Let's remember who was the one that said you got to bet Indiana 40-1 to win the Big Ten. And then I said it again at 30-1. Then I said it again at 20-1. I'm not going to say it at 9-1, obviously, because you're not going to get any hedge value. They're still going to be the underdog, probably by 10 plus points if they beat Ohio State and then play against Oregon. But I did give out Indiana look ahead line against Ohio State plus 10.5. It's already down to 9.5. Looks like it's creeping to 9. A lot of movement on there. Shout out to Kurt Signetti too. I know we're talking about this game for a little bit, but there's not many coaches that I like more than this guy at the moment. Indiana going into their game against Michigan State was one of the few teams that had not been trailing so far this season. They went down early, and then Kirk Signetti in the microphone said something along the lines of, I guess you see how we respond when we're down. Like a G. That was such a cold statement because they absolutely blew the doors out. I think they went on a 30-0 run there. But let's get into the next game. Big Ten game continue. Washington at number 6, Penn State. The Nittany Lions are a 13.5-point favorite. Total set at 46.5. And this is the night game on Peacock, 8 p.m. Eastern. I lean Penn State minus 13.5 here. What Washington excels at is what Penn State doesn't really care to do much, right? Penn State's not going to be just chucking the ball all down the field. Washington, top 3 pass defense in college football. They're really good at stopping the pass. What we saw with Woody Marks and USC, that their glaring weakness is stopping the run. Penn State, double-headed monster. They're just going to run and pound the rock. I think they're going to let out some frustrations. Typically, when Penn State loses to Ohio State or Michigan, depending on who they play first in the season, they end up blowing the doors off the next person. But 13.5 was a little bit too rich for my taste. I thought the line should be closer to maybe 10.5, maybe get to 11. But I don't put that much trust in Washington after beating their rival USC, especially coming cross country. So I feel like you have to lean something that's pro Penn State in this game. Eric, what is it that you like?
Yeah, well, with Washington, we know what they like to do. And defensively, they're one of the more imbalanced teams that we're going to experience, which is simply they get crushed on the ground, but their pass defense is exceptional. I mean, the only time they've really been beaten was last week against USC, who put up 293, but they were in a chasing script, of course, and they gave up. I mean, that's by far, they gave up 459 yards USC last week, and that's over 100 more than they had allowed in any other game this season. So, and with the exception of that, Mateer for Washington State threw for 245. No other team has cleared 130 yards other than USC and Washington State against this Washington Huskies team. Because if you're going to attack them, you can attack them on the ground. 166, 188, 220, 174, 184 in their last 5 games on the ground, which we know the Penn State can do with that two-headed Katron Allen, Nicholas Singleton, a stout, solid offensive line that has been moving mountains. And there's no reason why they wouldn't continue to use that same script against Washington here. The blueprint is clearly laid out. Drew Aller is listed at 206.5 passing yards. The last 2 games threw for 146 against Ohio State, threw for 148 against Wisconsin. And then against Illinois, they threw for 135. Against the more defense run-oriented teams, And, the softer teams, I guess you'd even say, they do better. But I mean, against the tough competition, they're not out there throwing the ball all around. They're playing a conservative game plan to, use the advantage they have on the line against them. I'm going under 206.5 yards for Drew Aller passing against Washington.
Yeah, I like that play. I mean, it makes a lot of sense and everything we were talking about. It seems like a more under game. And it's just a situation, too, where we know, and we've talked about it a bunch of times, these Big Ten teams traveling from time zone to time zone, West Coast to East Coast. Washington's 0-3 straight up and against the spread on the road this year. Teams in the Big Ten are 2-5 against the spread in this position going across the country. So Penn State, as we mentioned, too, last week, I mean, if anyone listened last week, that first half under didn't cash for us, for me specifically, but the second half under was free. I mean, Penn State, again, the most elite second half defense in the college football, apparently. I mean, 36 points allowed on the entire season. So I don't think Washington has much success here, moving the ball, scoring the ball, especially in this early game or in this time zone, difference. So team total under 16.5. If they score 10, 13 in the first half, I'd absolutely be laying that team total under in the second half or the game under, because Penn State, again, will like to get in and get out this game. And the last point, Brad, as you said, after they lose games, they've been so good in the Franklin era, but they're 4-0 in the money line, 3-1 against the spread after losing a game in the last few seasons. The only time they didn't cover, they were a 30-point favorite. They won by 9 in that game. But historically, also 20-4 on the money line following a loss last 24 times. So I expect them to bounce back and look really good here too.
I like that. Let's move over to the last Big Ten game. Maryland at number 1 Oregon. The Ducks are a 25.5 point favorite. Game in Eugene. Total set at 57.5. Another night game. Kicks off at 7 p.m. Eastern. Technically not a night game for primetime is what I meant. There are no props for this game, and I'm going to be on Mr. Dylan Gabriel over. I think they're probably going to set this one around 300, and I think 30. But I think I had my numbers down at 300.5, but that'd probably be high for what I think. I think they're going to set it at. They're probably going to set it lower than what I think. Let me put that correctly.
I'll probably go 289.5. That's my guess.
Yeah. That's more like it. I would probably play it.
So I think that's the range.
And be happy with it. This team passes the ball fast. They're efficient. And they're going against a Maryland team who's just not good in the secondary. Not good against the pass. 92nd defensive success rate against the drop back. EPA numbers bad too. They play fast. It's funny because they can get got in the middle of the field too. And why I say it's funny is because this is the first time that's happened in the Loxley era where the middle of the field is just always wide open. When they played against Northwestern, that kind of was their bugaboo, is just letting easy plays in the middle of the field, getting 5 and 6 yards at a time in small, short passes. I think Oregon be able to just feast on that. And then that's not even factoring in the explosives that Oregon kind of has there. They'll probably be without Tez Johnson. I think Tez Johnson's done for at least until the Big Ten championship.
Yeah,
so,
he's out. He's out indefinitely, collarbone, not having surgery, but he's probably out for the regular season.
That's why.
Yeah, that's why I was shocked when they said that he may come back for the Big Ten championship. That seems still a little scary with the broken bone.
Boss.
Like a boss.
We'll see.
But you probably, I mean, Oregon probably cover this game. They're just destroying everybody. But it's hard to be pro Oregon at the 25.5 when all they care about is just getting healthy and staying healthy. Eric, any love for this game, or Vaughn? What do you guys take it?
Yeah, well, Gary Bryant is back at practice, wide receiver, USC transfer. So at least they have, hopefully he comes in and can help with the absence of Tez Johnson. I think I expect Evan Stewart to step up as well. But fun little stat, even though, as we said, we don't have any props, but I will be interested in Dylan Gabriel because Oregon quarterbacks have thrown for 2,694 passing yards in 9 games this season. That is 10th best among FBS teams, whereas Maryland's defense has allowed 276 passing yards per game this season. That is the worst in the entire Big Ten in terms of pass defenses. So it's all written out there for us in terms of how I think Oregon is probably going to attack this porous defense.
Yeah, I mean, again, Oregon first half is probably the look I'd have to go with here when you're talking about, a play on a spread or a total. At Maryland, I mean, they looked great. The USC game, that was one of the most exhilarating games I've ever probably watched this season, to be honest with you. It was such an amazing comeback. And they go out the next week against Minnesota, lay an absolute dud. Then they have a bye week here with Oregon. So there's nothing much to make you think that. The traveling back and forth spot, while it does apply to them, they did have a bye week before. So kind of like, counteracts that stat. But last thing I'll say is, Oregon first half's good look. They probably do cover 25.5 because Dan Lanning, he's no Signetti, but he's a big coin respecter too. When I was looking at his numbers, it's insane. He's 31-5 straight up, 23-12-1 against the spread. That's 66%. Best of any Oregon coach since 1990, apparently. So, and he's pretty good. Double-digit favorite as well, Brad, 17-8 in 25 games. So, yeah, the Ducks are the only way I could look in this game. That's for sure.
100%. Let's get into this ad read real quick before we move into the People's Parlay. It's a showdown in the Lone Star State this Sunday. Watch Jared Goff and the Lions take on CJ Stroud and the Texans as both teams fight for playoff position down the stretch of the season. Coverage starts at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock.
As you all know by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up to BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE, and you'll get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code BETEDGE. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code BETEDGE when you sign up. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE and get your $1,500 first bet offer today.
The People's Parlay. I let everyone down. I was on USC and
Couldn't believe it.
Lincoln Riley just forgot that he has a quarterback, lost all kind of faith in him. Oh my
God. He literally lost faith in him now. Now he doesn't have a job anymore. Yeah, benched him. Jaden Mayaba time.
Yeah, it's wild.
Eric, kick off with your first leg, or you, Vaughn, if you're already ready.
I'll go. No problem. I'm going with BYU's money line over Utah. And, this is the Holy War at Rice-Eccles Stadium there in Utah. And I really don't think that this Utah Utes offense is going to be able to move the ball in any way, shape, or form. Is that my background? But Utah quarterback situation, Isaac Wilson, Zach Wilson's brother, has performed terribly up in this point. I think that's a pretty objective analysis on that too. So much so that Brandon Rose is now pushing him. We may see the sophomore quarterback take over. I don't even know what to tell you about Brandon Rose. I don't know much about him. He's the third string quarterback. Similar situation to what we see with Florida. And that's a big issue, right? Because even though Utah has a pretty solid defense, ranked second in success rate allowed, seventh in EPA per play, we know that BYU can move the ball pretty well. LJ Martin was banged up. He has been cleared to play this game. Their star running back, number one running back. That's going to be extremely important for Jake Retzlaff and company. But, keep in mind with BYU, they're pretty good defensively too. They ranked fifth nationally with 5.4 yards per pass allowed. So you're talking about a strength of this undefeated BYU team and a demonstrable weakness for Utah. I just think with this all coming together, they're not going to be able to move the ball effectively. I have to take Utah here. Give me the money line.
Yeah, I thought Brad would be on BYU.
BYU. What am I talking about?
Yeah.
BYU.
No, yeah, I'm correcting you. It's okay. I thought this would be Brad's play for sure going to this, or he'd be fading UCF this week. But I guess we'll get something else spicy from the guy. I'm rocking with Colorado money line, and mine. I like I said, they control their own destiny now. The season's become very much more interesting to be a Colorado fan or just a viewer for this team now, because they could certainly make a Big 12 championship and work their way into the college football playoff, which absolutely nobody saw coming after laughing at them all last year. So big opportunity here. And Shadur Sanders' draft stock can continue to go up here against Texas Tech, in my opinion. He lights them up, and so does Travis Hunter.
I went with I was going to take BYU, but I don't think I'm going to bet on BYU for the rest of the year because I'm getting close to cashing the 11-1 undefeated. So I don't want to like lose money and not hit that ticket. I actually have BYU 2 times. I have them at 8-1 and at 11-1 for a unit each. So I'd love to pick up 18 units somehow. But yeah, I went with Miami, and full transparency, this number moved since I sent it in. It was 10. I bet it at 10. It's now at 11.5. If you are betting this people's parlay, take it at the 11.5. Don't buy the points down. I still think they cover that. I think they cover with margin here. They're going against Georgia Tech. Like I said, it's a Georgia Tech that will be able to keep up offensively for a little bit, right? But at the end of the day, it's Haynes King who is going to have to go toe-to-toe with an offense that's number 1 in yards per game, number 3 in pass yards per game, a defense that's still turning teams over. And what's funny about this Miami team is we talk about they're pretty like not good defensively, but they're pretty good defensively at the same time, right? Like give up a lot of yards, give up a lot of points, but they still are turning teams over, still getting stops when it matters. Shootouts, they're fun. And then, they're led by Cam Ward. Cam Ward so far this season, 3,100 yards, 29 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. I did think this was kind of funny. It's not strengthening my point anyway, but it's 11 turnover-worthy passes this year. It's a huge number. That's not my Heisman, not throwing 11 turnover passes. But he loves to chuck the ball down the field. So I like that. The people's parlay, it's not a massive one, guys. You're not going to go out and buy a Lambo, but $10 pays $29.50. It's BYU money line, Miami -10, and Colorado money line. Let's get this one cashed, y'all. Best bets of the week. Eric, go ahead, and you can run yours down, or you can round robin. Up to you.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, Brad, I would figure you'd be quite excited about the guy I'm going to be talking about. We talked off the air, but we are playing the game of global domination known as Risk. Dylan, R-I-Z-K, Risk, quarterback for UCF. Gosh, what an odyssey it's been for Gus Malzahn and company. I feel for you as an Orlando resident there, Brad. Just been KJ Jefferson starts out. Ja'Cory Brown takes over for him. That didn't work out particularly well. So in comes Dylan Risk last game against Arizona. And given, I mean, this is Arizona's defense, which is as bad as it gets at the Power 4 level, but completed 20 of 25 passes for 294 yards, 3 touchdowns, even ran for 55 yards on 9 carries. I mean, just looked a lot more competent when I went and reviewed that whole game film than we saw from Ja'Cory Brown. And obviously, as discussed, this is Arizona. But the previous game, he took over for Ja'Cory against BYU, who we just discussed is 5th in the country in terms of yards per pass allowed. He went 6 for 10 for 102 yards and a touchdown in relief against BYU. I think that we're going to see him clear a very reasonable 184.5 passing yards line against Arizona State, given they've been pretty good against the pass. They're a decent team. But this is the UCF offense led by Gus Malzahn. I am in. Give me Dylan Risk over 184.5 passing yards.
Music to my ears. I wonder what that spread is now, because Arizona State probably going to be without Scatterbo in that game.
Keep in mind with UCF too, they've gone over 200 passing yards, I think all but one game this season, and that's with some pretty questionable passing acumen from their quarterbacks.
Is this the Arizona State homecoming? It's either their homecoming or like their senior day or whatever. They were like hyping it up. I couldn't find it out on social media. Either way,
I think it's homecoming because senior day is the last day.
Yeah.
Okay. The last game for those seniors.
Yeah. They were hyping it up and I couldn't figure out what it was. Like they were come out X, Y, and Z. But anyways, my best bet, Indiana -14. Vaughn, what's yours?
I like Notre Dame in the first quarter -6.5 against Florida State. Don't see many situations where Notre Dame doesn't get a touchdown on this team, right? I mean, you look at 4 of the past 5 games of Florida State against real opponents, SMU, Clemson, Duke, Miami. They've all scored at least a touchdown here, put up a first quarter score. So it's a situation where how the Fighting Irish not do that This team has been so bad, Florida State, where they've only covered, one or two spreads all season. They've rarely covered as plus 20 or higher underdogs, only 5 times since 1990, and it's happening here. So, I don't really want to play Notre Dame on the full game spread, but I think getting involved in the first quarter, first half is probably the right way to go here. So I'm going to try and get another first quarter bet in. Last week, guys, I apologize to everyone who was on Pitt SMU. If you didn't see, they scored a touchdown with 30 seconds left in the first quarter to go over. They called it back. The team gets down to the 3-yard line with 39 seconds. They let the clock run out to score the next play, first play of second quarter. Brutal. We need this one back.
What a fun random bad beat.
That's horrible.
That's as random as it gets.
My girlfriend started running my shit. It's okay. I said, just get past the chicken. It's time for dinner. Pass the chicken.
Yeah. Just move.
Let's segue. I was going to be on Notre Dame was going to be my best bet first half, and I ended up
I like it.
First quarter was going to be my best bet, and it ended up
yeah.
moving on me before I could get to the show. But I did like first half, and I didn't take the 14 in that game. I took the 14.5 because I still have this at 16 as my number. So it's like, why not get the extra value at the minus 105? Florida State, anemic offense, haven't scored more than 21 points all season. They're at this point in their season right now where it's kind of, we're seeing who wants to play football. We're seeing who can fill in the voids that we need. This is the best situation for bettors in fading Florida State. I faded them last week. I'm fading them again. I'm going to fade them the rest of the season. Is Mike Norvell pretty much has the job security of all job security. His buyout is massive. What he's done, if you look at the depth chart, is he's basically finding guys who will be involved with this team next season, getting them as much run as possible. What does that mean? They're disjointed offensively, disjointed defensively, and you have good situations where you can attack. Notre Dame is in that situation. Their secondary is really good. I think that Florida State's going to have real trouble moving the ball. So Notre Dame minus 14.5 is an additional bet that I made. Eric, if you don't mind, give us your last 2 bets before we close this out.
Yeah, a familiar friend, Rocco Becht, is listed at 247.5 passing yards for Iowa State. They're playing against Kansas. And this Kansas team, while they do a pretty good job of scoring, like their offense is good, they're giving up 28 points a game and 7.9 yards per pass. That's 97th in the country, 89th in success rate. The defense, we know what we're getting here with Kansas. There's no real secrets. I do think they'll be able to move the ball on the ground against Iowa State. They have an excellent run game behind Devin Neal, and that's what the weakness is of Iowa State. So I do think that this is going to be another competitive contest, which, the Cyclones seem to just breed this year.
Yeah.
Texas Tech, the UCF was close. Baylor was a 2, the last few weeks, it's gotten a little more close in terms of the competitive of these games. And with Rocco, 299, 274, 265, 277, each of the last 5 games against all Big 12 opponents. The only time he didn't go over was in a 20-0 win over Houston, which that Houston team plays so slow with Willie Fritz. They just didn't have time to throw. But against all their other Big 12 opponents, he's just cruising over this. And with Kansas, this is what they do, is allow pass plays. I think it's all here. 247 is a very reasonable line for Mr. Rocco Becht.
Love
that. I'm going to go 2 in a row, don't I?
Yeah, you do. Back to back, baby.
I want to say, Eric, the guy you're about to talk about, I bet his under last week, and it was smooth sailing.
Zero sweat, right?
Zero.
Well, that's the tradition of Iowa, is what we're going to talk about. And this is something that we've been doing this for 3 years, this show. Every year, one of the time-honored traditions is betting the under of the Iowa quarterback. And this year it was Mr. Cade McNamara, who, even though he's injured, he's made himself a very strong case to be a player props All-American. He will at least get an honorable mention. But that being said, he's been replaced by Brendan Sullivan. And Sullivan was placed up in the 130 range last week. 7 of 10 passes. They threw 10 passes for 93 yards and a touchdown in a 42-10 victory over Wisconsin. In the previous game against Northwestern, 14 passes for 79 yards. Listen, we know what Iowa wants to do here. There's no secret. They want to pound Caleb Johnson. Yep. In addition, unlike Cade McNamara, Brendan Sullivan is a legit dual threat quarterback. He wants to run too, 9 times for 58 yards. I put out the 9.5 rush attempts over for Brendan Sullivan. He ran 9 times, had a team rush attempt, which ended up in a fumble because he got a bad snap. They called it a team rush attempt. That's just another example of the NCAA trying to screw us and the bettors of the world for no apparent reason. I don't know. I don't know what team rush attempt.
Yeah, that's
they're inventing things. They did it with Brendan Sorsby too last.
Yeah.
I mean, the NBA is good for that too, man. NBA is good for that too.
I know. So they're the official statisticians, not friends of the props community. Clearly, that being said, it's not going to matter. They put up Brendan Sullivan at 136.5 this game. He went for, as we discussed, 93 and 79 in the last 2 games. Obviously, he was in relief of Cade McNamara, but they're playing UCLA here. And that's a Friday night game. And I will actually be in attendance for this. So you want to talk about me having a stake in the game, baby. I will be at Iowa at UCLA. I will be sacrificing my Friday night to watch the ground-oriented football we'll be watching from Iowa. And I think that's what we're going to get. I think we're getting another 40 rushes, 15 passes, and adios. Let's head back to Iowa. So that's my personal opinion. I think we're getting another under. We have to do this. This is the Iowa quarterback tradition we've established on this show. Welcome to the club, Brendan Sullivan. We're taking your under 136.5 passing yards.
You know, and we mentioned it last week too, but Caleb Johnson again. I mean, there's no reason why you shouldn't be backing his touchdown bets or anything, or his rushing
yards. Only 120. He's going to get the ball 25, 30 times. Only 120 yards.
And this is, I mean, I was wrong on the total. I literally thought at halftime of the Iowa game last week we are cashing, Brad, the under in that game, and then Iowa exploded in the second half. But Caleb Johnson plus 160 to score 2 touchdowns. Next highest player is a UCLA guy at 850. So clearly the books do not expect them to do much of anything here. More than one guy to score for UCLA. So yeah, I like that. I think Sullivan will go under by ease.
Easily. They're going to run the ball. Guys, this was fun as always. Man, I love doing shows with you guys. It gets me jazzed, gets my week going. Don't forget to check out NBCsports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those of you watching on our NBC Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to subscribe and rate us. Also, a reminder, find all of your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to Amazon.com/NBC Sports. For Eric Froton and Vaughn Delzell, I'm Brad Thomas. Best of luck this week.